Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I want to welcome everybody to the fourth and final candidate mayoral interview. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. First off, my name is Carol Heil, and I've lived in Leucadia for 8 years. I've been a member of NOWLeucadia since the beginning, since the start of NOWLeucadia. NOWLeucadia is a grassroots volunteer group, and we are working to inform residents about different issues involving Northwest Leucadia and to advocate for two main campaigns: safe pedestrian rail crossings in our corridor and safe pedestrian passage on Vulcan between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue. Before we get started, I wanted to go over some housekeeping items about the format of this Zoom interview. First off, this Zoom is being recorded. It is our intention to post the recordings on the NOWLeucadia website after all the interviews have been conducted. Secondly, if you'd like to ask a question of the candidate, please submit your written question in the chat column. Those questions that are not addressed during the interview will be presented during the open question period. And finally, if you're interested in getting involved with NOWLeucadia, you can reach out to our website, our Facebook page, Instagram, or email. Please look in tonight's chat column for additional information. At this time, I'd like to ask everybody to turn off to mute and stop your video. And Michael, I'm going to have you take it away. This is Michael Murray, a member of NOWLeucadia, and he'll be moderating tonight's interview.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. So, Michael, it's nice to meet you. As Carol mentioned, we appreciate you taking the time and making the effort to speak with us tonight.
Thank you.
What we'll plan to do with the recording is at some point, excuse me, in the next day, certainly by Saturday, we'll have the videos up on the NOWLeucadia website. And just in terms of structure, the way we've been doing these interviews, for various reasons, we think it's important to just try and kind of be consistent in how we're approaching this. So we've got a couple of questions about Encinitas, a couple of questions about Leucadia, and then just a couple of other sort of more specific questions. And importantly, we're posing the same questions to everyone that we speak to. And then depending on how things work out when we finish, excuse me, when we finish with that, if there are some questions that come in through the chat, we can kind of take those as they come in. And then we'll just kind of, we'll shoot for an hour. And, if depending on sort of how things go, if we finish before then, great. And, but we'll certainly be appreciative of your time and mindful of that. So I will start by introducing Michael. So for those of you folks on the call, Michael is a singer-songwriter and interim vice president and treasurer of the board, excuse me, for Barefoot is Legal, which is a national federally registered civil rights organization. He has vast management experience in the retail and hospitality industries. Michael also describes himself as an ordinary person without a mansion or CEO title. Importantly, he has the ability to prioritize budgeting, so as to favor needs versus wants. And I'm sure those things we'll sort of touch on some of that, obviously, as we go through some of the questions, because being able to naturally prioritize spending is a big thing, right? So appreciate that you providing that information, Michael. And at this point, we'll kind of get started with the first couple questions have to do with Encinitas in general. So the first question that we'll start with is, your vision for Encinitas, both short-term and long-term. Can you speak to that, please?
So my vision for the city is to be a more responsible city as far as spending goes, to be a more safer city as far as crime goes, and most importantly, to be a city that will listen to its residents and try its best to follow what the residents' voice is asking for, and not tell the residents, well, we heard your voice and most of you didn't want this, but we're still going to go ahead and do it. That's my main goal is creating a I want to put a poll on the city website. So important issues, the community can vote on it, and
Right,
the voice of that vote will be felt on the city council's decisions.
good.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, moving
Okay, so great.
forward.
So, sorry.
No problem.
Pardon. I was
No,
just going to summarize. So fiscally responsible, safer, and then more responsive to residents. I think
Yes.
that came across as clear. Fair enough. Good. Okay. And I apologize if I interrupt you there. Just please feel free
No,
to
fine.
fire away. Right. Excuse me. So if possible, could you prioritize the top 3 issues or challenges that you think the city of Encinitas faces today? How would you address those 3 issues?
Oh, I can. So the top issue for me is what I call needs before aesthetics, because it encompasses everything.
Yeah.
So instead of spending millions and millions of dollars on like aesthetic projects, like something like a streetscape, not the majority of the community did not ask for streetscape. I think it was mostly the businesses, and I know a lot of businesses I talked to didn't even ask for it.
Right.
But we're spending, I think it's close to 70 million now on streetscape, and that money could have gone to fixing the infrastructure, putting crosses in NOWLeucadia,
Mhm.
crossings, paying for more law enforcement, paying for the bluffs to be stabilized. Like there's a lot of money. Like
Sure.
with the money we could have put in 3 above or below ground crossings in NOWLeucadia. I mean,
Right.
so we need to clamp down on needless spending and look at what we need to spend money for.
Right.
And if there's something left over to do beautification later on, that's fine, but not
Yeah.
right now.
I get
Number
it.
number two is crime. I get it that the captain is saying that there's enough. The sheriff's captain is saying that
Mhm.
there's enough funding, but the issue is this: if we're running on the minimum budget, so if he has enough on a minimum budget, that's not good enough. I mean, the standard status quo for law enforcement officers is you have 1 per 1,000 people in a city.
Mhm.
So Encinitas has 62,000. The issue is this station also takes care of Solana Beach and Del Mar. So you have to put that into account. You have to
Sure.
look at those populations of those cities, and then you have to look at doubling, tripling, quadrupling funding, and getting in
Right.
touch with those cities and having those cities also contribute to more funding
Right.
to get more deputies on the street. Because I talked to people
Got it.
in NOWLeucadia, shop owner said the sheriffs used to come patrol the alley behind his business, and they stopped, and now there's people putting creating bonfires back in there, and there's people
Wow.
fighting, and that's because the sheriff's not patrolling anymore. And then if you take one drive from, say, La Costa down to Swami's and back, you'll see multiple violations. I've almost traffic violations, running stop signs, illegal U-turns, and I've almost have had a head-on collision
Wow.
twice over by 7-Eleven of somebody coming the wrong way. And even though this is all happening, I can't even recall a time when I've seen somebody pulled over in
It's
NOWLeucadia.
yeah. Fair
I
enough.
feel like there's not a lot of enforcement over here.
Right.
So we need to up it throughout the city. And third is the homeless situation. I've said time and time again, I want to focus on the substance abuse and mental
Mhm.
health, which I think is the core cause of the problem. I don't support a shelter. We don't have the resources to, to have a shelter here. We're not a big town.
Right.
Escondido's big enough. Oceanside's big enough.
Right.
I mean, I couldn't even envision a shelter in cities like San Marcos or Vista.
Yeah. Fair
Um,
enough. Yeah.
And so we need to work with organizations that can work with these. So I want to create an office in the city. And a lot of people have like a misconception of what I would be doing. I'm not saying I'm going to take care of these people in that office and treat them and like, no, we have different organizations. We have it's called Kiva and Lemon Grove. We got
Mm.
Tender Loving Mercy in Oceanside. We got Serenity House in Escondido. I can keep going on and on.
Sure.
There are multiple organizations that will take them in. And right now, all we have is like, if somebody goes into like one of the nonprofits right now, for instance, they're going to be told that an appointment's going to be made for them for like 2 weeks out, and they can come back and then they can get it figured out. I don't get the thinking pattern of that, because if somebody has a mental issue, which has been my experience, I was trying to help somebody with a mental issue, and they would want help, and I would try to go and get them help, but by 2 weeks later, their minds changed completely. And so I want to have a program where I have mental health specialists that can take somebody directly to one of these organizations. Like, for instance, Kiva, if they have space, they'll take somebody that day, that hour. Okay, so that is out there, but we're just not doing it. We're scheduling people for appointments, and that has to stop. So,
all right, good. So that sounds good. So prioritize functional improvements to the city versus just beautification projects. And then crime, it sounds like funding for more police officers and working with adjacent communities for that. And then similarly create that office you would create would help coordinate some of those efforts for homeless folks. That sounds good. Okay.
correct.
And I just repeat that so I make sure I'm processing right. So, okay, so similar question, but maybe a little bit more specific in terms of projects. Are there 3 projects you could identify that you would push if you were elected?
In the entire city?
Encinitas, yeah,
In the
in this
entire
whole
city,
city,
okay.
yeah.
So I would say top priority, as I've said, would be crossings in Leucadia, rail crossings. We not only did we not fight the fence like Del Mar is, which is still stalling the fence, but we paid for the fence to be installed by the city's money, not NCTD's.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
And if I would have been in charge, I would have told NCTD we're fighting the fence, and if you do put the fence in, you're going to pay for that fence, and you're going to pay for crossings, because crossings are an integral part. They've been asked for decades, and even the mayor in the state of the city had mentioned how important the El Portal crossing was to streetscape, because it connected the communities. So when I heard that, I'm like, so you're saying this community it's important to this community, but Leucadia doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is streetscape's already in motion. It would be a fantasy to say that I'm going to stop streetscape and undo everything. No. So what I would do is I would go in and I would actually modify streetscape, and I would put the crossings in as a requirement. And I would say that I'm doing this based on the previous mayor's explanation that the crossings are integral for streetscape. And I would use some of the funding from streetscape to fund the crossings, and maybe cut other things out like roundabouts and such to pay for the crossings.
Got it.
And also other thing I don't believe in designated bike lanes, because as I've said previously in other interviews, that we're trying to push alternative modes of transportation, but right now nobody is doing those modes of transportation, and you can't spend money and force people to do that transportation when they're still in their automobiles. Maybe sometime in the future, when people are more open to it, maybe you've done some advocacy and got people to do it, then we spend the money on that. But you don't want to block a lane of traffic. Instead, I envision a very nice bike lane, a very wide bike lane, and still keep the 2 lanes intact.
Got it.
And that it's safer than a Sharrow, because Sharrows, I feel, bikes don't belong in the same lane as a car, because that's extremely dangerous if somebody doesn't see a bicyclist in that lane. So
okay.
So that's my top priority. Second priority would have to be, actually I haven't brought this up, never been asked this question, so it would be the bluffs.
Got it.
Stabilizing all the bluffs. We've had too many collapses. We've had people killed.
Sure.
We just had beacons collapse. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that the money that was supposed to stabilize the walkway is the money that went to the fence for the rail track.
Oh, interesting.
So I would allocate money to get all the beach access stabilized, make sure that everything is what do we call it? I don't renovated.
Yeah.
So we don't have the old wooden rickety walkways that might be risky for collapse. I want to have contractors come in and look at it and see if they can stabilize it so
Right.
that we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
And then of course more focus on stabilization of the bluffs
Right.
themselves. Number three would be something that a lot of people I talked to in the Livenheim were asking for, and they say that they really wish that the the safe trails along the road would be finished, because in a lot of spots
Oh, really?
there's no
Interesting.
place. Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
place to walk, and you're just directly in the road. And so I know a portion of it was finished. And so I think those also have to be a priority. It seems to be a need for public safety of walking on the roads, and I'm basically for public safety.
Yeah.
All these projects. So.
Okay, good. Well, I appreciate that. It was very thorough. Okay, last question about Encinitas in general has to do with funding. So lack of funding at the city level seems to be a chronic issue and a limiting factor for improvements throughout the city. How would you deal with that? How does that get looked at?
So lack of being that I'm a treasurer of the board for my organization, it means I have to approve anything over $100. And I feel like the lack of funding is not lack of funding; it's lack of responsible spending. I mean, if we're spending we're spending $70 million on streetscape, and then we're randomly putting in stoplights. I still don't get the stoplights on the 101 that just suddenly appeared at roads like at next to
Sure. Yeah.
the
I know what
coffee
you're
shop. I
talking
can't
about. Right.
Panikin.
Yep.
Why is there a stoplight there? So we're putting stoplights, and we're putting a roundabout up in off Andrew. I think it's up by Andrew.
Right.
It's been a bit of a debate locally.
Sure.
And I looked at it, just a bunch of cones, but we're like, so why are we doing these random little things that are just costing money that just don't make sense? And so when they say there's a lack of funding in the city, I don't look at it as a lack of funding. I look at it as you're just not allocating the funding that we do have for what we need. We're basically allocating it to have fun and have some kind of experiments and what we can do with modifications to the city, and that's not how we do it. So we have to take care of what we need fixed before we start doing pet projects.
Yeah, and so maybe just to follow up on the heels of that, how would you make that sort of so one of the things, well, actually I'll wait and ask this question, because one of the questions we have that's a group that is one of the questions that was submitted initially, and we thought it was a good question, has to do with balancing the different needs of the community. So I'll shelve that question until we get to that point. So we'll move on to the Leucadia question. So do you have a vision for District 1 and Northwest Leucadia, and could you speak to that, please?
I live in Leucadia, and I have actually been coming. Beacons has been the beach I always went to as a kid, even though I didn't live here at that time. And then we go to La Special Norte.
Nice.
And it was a tradition. And one thing about Leucadia is it's always been more rural.
Right.
And that's kind of that's kind of why people like it here. And so now we're talking a lot about affordable housing and density and stuff like that. And so the issue is in Leucadia, it's getting built up. It's almost like it's getting to the point where it's getting more built up than downtown. And so I'd like to see to find a way to somehow preserve some of the rural feeling of Leucadia and not let it get built up. But at the same time, I have to figure out how to juggle the requirements that we have placed on us for affordable housing. And I feel, which I've stated multiple times before, is the way to do that is to require all incoming projects to have 30 to 50% affordable housing already required.
Okay.
And in that way, there are less developments that have to be done in the name of affordable housing,
Right.
because you're already boosting up those numbers in the existing developments. And so my vision of Leucadia is to keep its charm, to not destroy it. I mean, we have downtown. If we want to go downtown, we can go a
Right.
couple miles down the street.
Right.
I want to keep Leucadia's charm. I want to make it safer, though. I want to have the crossings in. I want to have sidewalk and curves at La Costa
Right.
and Vulcan. So it's an actual safe intersection for pedestrians as well.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah, and so my main focus is what keep Leucadia rural and keep Leucadia weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, so next question about Leucadia, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of overlap here in terms of Leucadia and Encinitas, and forgive me for that, but the next question is, what are the top 3 challenges that District 1 and Northwest Leucadia face, and how would you address those? And I think you've started to speak to some of this with the you just did in your most recent answer about housing and stuff. But in any case, top 3 challenges and how you would address them for Leucadia.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, the rail challenge 1 for Leucadia is still the rail crossings. I mean, we're blocking out half the community from being able to get to businesses, to shop. I know one man on Hillcrest that has to used to cross with his cane at the track safely, and now he can't. So he takes his wheelchair all the way down to Leucadia Boulevard and all the way back to Just Peachy. Has to worry about the battery, running out before he gets home. And so we need to reconnect both sides of the tracks, so to speak. I mean, the fence is not keeping out suicides. I mean, that if anybody wants to commit suicide, they can jump the fence.
Right.
It's keeping out seniors who can't climb over the fence. It's keeping out people who might have a disability who can't climb over the fence.
Right.
And so we need to find a solution for them, as well as for everybody to have their beach access.
Yeah.
And second of all, as I stated, keeping Leucadia rural.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just part of the deal. And like some of the stuff, I think the resort that they built looks nice, but at the same time, it's like this big skyrise, almost like a skyrise, a big city skyrise.
It's an edifice, right? It's a big chunk of concrete.
Yeah, and so I think those would be my main focuses for Leucadia, as well as, like as I mentioned, the law enforcement presence, because I don't think Leucadia is kind of the least focused on as far as enforcement or deputies patrolling. I just want to see a Leucadia keep its charm, and also public safety be boosted in all forms, be it transportation or safety.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, final question for Leucadia has to do with you're running for mayor. So why do you, we did put this in here, right? So why do you think you are the best candidate to serve as the mayor of Encinitas?
So there's actually a couple reasons. Reason number 1 is I think unity is very important. I think that by falling onto one side, you're not going to get anything done. I have experience negotiating in the organization I am a part of.
Yep.
We have everything from extreme right, chemtrail right, conspiracy theorists,
right,
to extreme left, I don't know what, woke people,
right,
to strict Christians, to Satanists, to I can go to vegetarians, to vegans.
Sure.
So the issue I had to work with them, because initially we would have fights about, well, this time that I would say we are working for a certain cause.
Sure.
And we have to put our differences behind us if we're going to get anything done. So if you guys are fighting over your beliefs here, it's not, it's getting us nowhere.
Right,
So
right.
we've calmed that down, and I've had to deal with that a lot.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten the mentality where
Okay.
I personally don't have any I guess you would call prejudices towards any side.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I would be able to come in and be like, hey, I want to hear this side and I want to
Sure.
hear this side. And I want to come to a compromise that it's going to work for both of you. It's not going to
Got
work
it.
100% for both of
Got it.
you, but it's going to work enough so that you're at least semi happy. And
Got it.
then once that's done, I want to go to the actual community and have their voice give their opinion on the final product and if they approve it or not. And that's how I want to move forward in that respect.
Okay.
But also the other part, which I've met, which has basically been the point of the conversation up to now, is
Yeah.
also because I'm the treasurer of the board and because I have to make those decisions of what I think is necessary past $100.
Yeah.
I feel like I would be able to work with the city council and explain to them like we can't be wasting this money because I
Right.
have this experience and we need to budget for
Right.
what we need first. And so that's, I think those two things, at
Okay.
least for me,
Good.
is what gives me the upper hand.
And I know somebody asked this question, but this is a good time to pivot to this. Have you had interest in government before? Is there a reason why you decided to jump into mayor versus any other kind of thing, whether it's a council seat or anything like that? Have you previously had any particular interest in being involved in local government?
So when I do get into involved in local government, it's when I get kind of bothered by what's going on.
Okay.
So I used to live in Valley Center before I moved here, and I threw my hat in the ring for the planning. They don't.
Okay.
Valley Center does not have a city council. They have a planning committee.
Mm.
And so I threw my hat and started running for planning committee because at that time we had nothing up there. We had just a little market and a little just nothing up there. Everybody
Yeah.
went to Escondido. And so we had this other guy that wanted to like come in and develop everything. And so I was coming in the middle and saying like, we need one supermarket, we need one drugstore, we need one maybe skate park so the teens don't have
Sure.
to drive to Escondido.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to see. But what happened is that's just when I moved here. It's the house I had up there, the main line went, which the sewer line in the house, and they said I'm gonna, had to be hammered up and $60,000. So I just said I got to leave town.
Yeah.
And so I just basically kind of let the election go.
Got it.
So we've come back to now.
Got it.
I'm sitting here. I see all these issues that I'm talking about. The thing that started was the rail crossings.
Right.
When they were first talking about putting a fence up. So I tried to contact Tony, send a couple
Sure.
emails, and actually I have the record. I know I have the record of it. I sent an email with a picture of San Clemente at grade crossing. And I asked them like, why can't we have something like this?
Yeah.
And it literally was like about a month later that it showed up in his blog. He was talking about what about at grade crossings, and I don't know if it was a coincidence, but I never heard back from him. And I can still go back and Google and I can pull that email.
Sure.
But so the issue is we have that happening. Like I said, the crime and homeless situation out here.
Just kind of motivated. Sounds like it just kind of motivated you to get.
Yeah, I'm looking. I tried to talk to. Sent emails to the city council on various issues, including like even my organization saying, "Hey, I'd like to educate and talk to you guys about that." I went to the state of the city, not this time, but last time, and I hand delivered a letter to the mayor sitting right there. I never heard from them. So what I said to myself is, these guys are not. They're not interested in even talking to you. They're not interested in saying like, well, I got your email. I'll think about it. I'll look into it. Not even acknowledgement. It's just total like silence. And so I decided that it's time, like somebody has to get in there that's going to do something.
Be more
and
responsive
listen to the people. Yeah.
And
actually get the things done. So
got it. Okay. Fair enough. Good. Thank you. Good answer. you thoroughly talked about that. Good. Okay, so I think that's it for the Leucadia questions. There are some general questions. You've touched on this already, so no surprise for NOWLeucadia or for you, given where you live. How would you handle the issue with the fencing that's currently set up on the rail corridor?
So I feel as long as we have the crossings put in, I'm not gonna say the fence is in. Well,
Yeah,
my philosophy is once something is done, you're not going to spend resources to undo
yeah,
it.
yank it out. Yeah.
But what I would do is I would tell NCTD that I'm not going to spend city money to maintain the fence, nor am I going to spend city money to patrol the fence, which is something that I heard that they want to send
Okay.
sheriffs out to patrol the fence now. And I'm going to tell them, if you
Right.
you need to start maintaining your own fence, and if you want to patrol it, you can send your they have
Right.
transit police. They can send their own transit police to patrol it and take on all the cost, because they're the ones that wanted the fence. We didn't.
Right.
The community
I
did not
haven't.
want the fence.
It's interesting living in Leucadia and crossing the tracks, right? Like so many people, I've been stopped by the county sheriff in the past, and obviously you occasionally see them. I don't know that I've seen anyone since the fencing, admittedly, because the fence is there. I'm not going down there as frequently to cross, right? So the opportunity for me to see this happening is diminished, but I don't know if they're checking or what they're doing. I know this has come up in some of the other conversations we've had, that the fence, that cable fencing, which looks nicer than the chain link, but people are clipping the cables periodically. So that's been happening, right? You see them out, and I presume it's NCTD that's out repairing that. And there's obviously a lot to say about all that stuff, but I get where you're coming from. Since the fencing's in, the focus needs to be on getting the crossings in, because it wouldn't make sense to focus on tearing it out. So I get that.
But it's actually not NCTD fixing the fence. It's the city of Encinitas.
Oh, is it?
Paying for,
Okay.
they're paying to maintain it, because it's being cut weekly, and they're sending people out to fix it. And so I heard, not officially from an official source, but I've heard around that they're thinking of actually assigning sheriffs to actually patrol the fence and try to catch people cutting it. And that's where I'm like, okay, why are we sending sheriffs to look at a fence when we got other stuff?
Yeah, there are
to be
bigger
doing,
fish to fry, right? As you say.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Admittedly, that's interesting. Okay. That sounds good. The next question has to do with, and again, these were questions that were asked of Tony the first time we did a call, and we thought they were worthwhile because it's come up. So your view of sanctuary cities.
Are you asking if I think Encinitas is a sanctuary
Well,
city?
this is it's a great sort of bit of nuance that I think is super important, because quite frankly, that's not always applied in this case. I think the question that was asked of Tony is, what's your view of sanctuary cities? People that pay attention would be able to say, well, let's distinguish between the immigration component and the homeless stuff. And so, if somebody asked you, you're getting a coffee, and let's say you get elected mayor and you're getting a coffee, and somebody says, you don't like this sanctuary city, what do you say to them? You would say, but we're not a sanctuary. Or what would you say to them? Right?
So well, basically what I would explain is, we're not a sanctuary city. What the issue is, the entire county, the entire state is having an issue. I've been in Escondido the past few weeks a lot, because I have to do some training for my organization. Because if I do win, somebody else has to take over my duties, because I don't plan to stay in position and have an organization be on my, as something for people to complain about. So I've been in Escondido, and up Auto Parkway, there was trash down the whole sidewalk, and a tent. And I came in the morning, and when I was leaving at night, they had a junk company picking up all the trash. And they left a tent, but they took all the belongings, because they were filling up the sidewalk. And so, they know how to handle it. Like you can't kick somebody out from camping, but you can remove a junk if it's there.
Got it.
And so then I'm driving, and then like the shopping centers, like right on their lawn, like you know how all the shopping centers have the grass
Yeah.
lawn.
Yeah.
There's like a tent pitched right there, and somebody sleeps. So when you go to other cities, you see it too.
Yeah.
And it's so
Important point.
the reason we look like a sanctuary city, the reason we look like we're having major issues is because we don't know how to handle it. We don't have somebody to
Got it.
handle it.
Got it.
We're giving handouts with no strings attached, no requirements to get yourself better.
Got it.
We don't have enough of a homeless task force. I mean, the sheriff's department has a little bit of a presence with PERT for crisis situations.
Right.
And I guess Tony was speaking about hope, but I've talked to some people in that that area, and they say that the staffing for mental health issues like is not great, not that great. For homeless outreach is not great. If you look at Carlsbad, I mean, I think Carlsbad, like if you compare Carlsbad to Encinitas, Carlsbad is similar to Encinitas. It's the same size. They don't have the basically the structure to take care of the situation, but they've initiated the homeless outreach program with the police. And everything's almost the same. There's a CRC office there. There's a CRC office here. People are saying the CRC office brings the homeless. Then why, if there's one in Carlsbad, are we not having the same problem? So these arguments that come up for various reasons about why the homeless, it's just because we
just
are
don't know how
not
to deal
equipped.
with it.
We're not equipped to deal with it right
Got
now,
it.
and we need to figure out how to deal with it.
How to do it. So you touched on one point that I'll just ask you to maybe just speak to a little bit. Does the city of Encinitas provide, so you mentioned CRC, so obviously that organization has been in Encinitas for a very long time. Does the city do anything else for homeless population? Like, are there places you can get food or anything in it? I know there's obviously that parking lot that was obviously controversial when it got put in. Are there other things that the city's doing?
Well, the city's not doing anything as far as food goes. I mean, food, like I said, I would leave giving food out to the organizations like CRC and St. Andrews, and such. Like, I don't think the city should be doing a pantry type deal. Right now I think the city has a limited outreach, but it's not enough. I want to have I want to have people boots to ground, people going out on the streets, going into the
encampments and whatnot. Oops, I think we lost him there. I'm gonna guess that was an accident, so maybe we'll give him a minute to hop back on.
Am I back?
You're back. Good man.
I don't know. It's just like I'm like, I don't know what was going on there. So
unfortunately, we've all had tech issues that you're like, oh yeah, that happens, right? So fair enough. So you're back quickly. Good work.
Yeah. So so I want boots to ground. I want people to go out to the street. I want people to go down into the camps. And to actually have outreach where they go and they try to convince these people to get mental health help or substance treatment.
Sure.
And until the governor's law kicks in, which we have to see how that's going to work with the care courts, where we can actually,
that's a really good point.
And then at that point we may be able to, some of the ones that are just out of it, that are yelling up and down the sidewalk or out and they can't decide for themselves, then maybe we can utilize the new law
to get them help.
But I can't speak on that until we
fair.
know.
That's a really important point. So
but I want to have a city office that's going to actually deal with that. So what I would like to do is take some of the responsibilities away from the nonprofits, and that would be dealing with the outreach and dealing with like handing out the keys to hotel rooms and the parking spots, because I want to have at least a little bit of a requirement that we don't have mental issues or
Right.
substance
drug
abuse
things, yeah,
issues. Because the reason I say that is
Yeah.
I've been around town. I've talked to people that are living in their vans and stuff, and there are a lot of them that are just down on their luck, and they're just in a temporary bind. And a
Right,
lot of them even have kids. There's
right,
some seniors out there,
right.
and so I envision the parking lot for those people, not the ones that are gonna like
Fair
toss
enough.
trash on the ground and go out.
Yeah,
So
fair enough. I
so the
think,
reason I
yeah.
the reason I want to screen is I want to make sure those people are safe and they're not having somebody on a drug rage or going
Right,
into a mental meltdown, and
right,
yeah, it can harm
right,
them. So
right.
yeah.
Okay, good. Well, that was very, very, you covered some ground there. Good. Um, the next question has to do with our current mayor and what you would do differently than her. How would you approach this? So, yeah,
So some I go back to, I think the main issue of
yeah,
our current mayor is she is out of touch with the community, and she can like I hear from not from her as much, but from like other council members that it's
right,
just like a vocal part of the community, and
right,
the majority doesn't think that way. But I've talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of supporters of her, but there's a lot of people, even some of the supporters agree that she didn't like really
yeah,
respond to
right.
communicate with you. And
Got
I
it.
think part of that is some people, I mean, especially since she's running for a greater office,
Right,
some people get like kind of like the politician um, attitude where you are, it's a delegation type attitude. So it's like, I'm here, but I don't really answer you. I mean, there's people, people, the city clerk or something might be able to answer you, but I can't. I'm not going to
right.
directly hear what you're saying, and we already have plans in motion. And so if we get a majority of the people saying they don't like it, we still
Yeah,
have to go that course.
yeah,
And so I think the main difference between me and her would be that I would be more open to being flexible. Like
yeah,
if I wanted something personally and the community didn't want it, I would say, okay, I'm
yeah.
voting for what you want. I'm not gonna force my personal opinion or agenda
Sure,
on
on the
anything.
community. Yeah,
So I mean, I think a lot of this stuff like ban this and ban that and ban this and ban that, and alternative transportation, even though
yeah,
our trains are empty and our buses are empty, I think a lot of that
yeah,
came from her because she was always trying to open the
yeah,
free train ride a day and all this stuff going on.
yeah, yeah.
And so I'm not going to push um, my opinions on what I think is best for the people. I'm going to follow what the people think is best for them. And I
Good.
think that rounds up the difference.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So last question has to, and then we'll segue into looks like there are one or two questions. How would you manage, we touched on this very briefly earlier. How would you manage pressure from the different communities within Encinitas?
Well, so this is where I come back to, which I mentioned
Yeah,
before.
sure.
It's the unity thing.
Yeah,
So I know some people say it can't be done, but with my experience, it can be done if you hear from all sides of an issue, and then you ponder how you can take all sides and come to a compromise that's going to work for everybody. Now, what does a compromise that's going to work for everybody mean? It means that at least you're going to be semi happy, or you're going to be at least appeased by the decision. It's not going to be having you raging and coming to council meetings opposing it with a
right,
fierce opposition.
right,
And I think it's possible. It's just like you have to have the ability to cut certain things out
right.
and add certain things in from the other side and come to a rounding
Consensus, yeah.
consensus.
Yeah.
And so, yes, will everybody be happy? No. The
Yeah.
way I see it is pretty much all sides will not be happy and they will not be mad at the same time. They'll be appeased
Yeah,
because
I think it's an, yeah,
it's a compromise.
yeah,
So
I think that's an
yeah,
important point. That's right.
and yeah, so that's how I envision it, because I think the issue of the reason why communities are against communities or exploding
Yeah,
is because we're leaning one way or the other on any certain amount of issues. I mean, I don't want to start spouting them off in particular because I think
Yeah, no.
we've covered a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I think we lean too much in one direction, and once we get to that direction, anything that's said beyond that is just like we're already in this course.
Yeah.
And so we can do it. Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So more of a consensus approach to dealing with all the different communities. Good.
Yeah.
So we already talked about one of the questions that came in that had to do with why starting at mayor and why not a city council, a commission, excuse me. And you talked a little bit about that. So there's a question here about your thoughts around the recent approval for the Verde undercrossing in Cardiff. And if you were mayor, could you have orchestrated that funding to support? Would that be something you'd have been able to push to essentially direct that funding towards Leucadia instead of Cardiff?
Oh yes, definitely. So the issue is I was at the Verde Crossing
Meeting? Yeah.
meeting, and we had, I think every single speaker was against it, including 3 residents from
Cardiff.
Cardiff. Actually, one of them said she lived right there in that neighborhood.
Interesting.
Then Tony had mentioned that they received a lot of email regarding it, and the majority of it was against it. And
Interesting.
they voted for it anyway. He was saying the reason that it was like where they're going to get funding is because it's shovel ready.
Right.
My question is, why is it shovel ready? We talked about this I think it was 4 years ago when they planned to do the crossing up here. Now I can't remember.
Yeah,
the name of
Hillcrest.
Yeah. No, not Hillcrest. They planned to
Oh.
do the school, the
Oh.
farmers market.
Yeah, the one at Pawlecki there. Yeah.
Yeah. So they planned to do that one first, and then
Yeah.
they planned to do Verde next. And so at that time, I remember, but it was before anybody was talking about running for mayor. It's like 4 years ago. There was an outcry. Why are you, ignoring Leucadia? Why are you doing another crossing, before doing Leucadia?
Yeah.
And so at that time they said, okay, we're actually going to do a Leucadia one first, either at Hillcrest or Glaucus. I think it was. And then a couple years ago, they did like a horn demonstration, like show how the horns were going.
Sure.
And then I hear about the Verde crossing, and I'm like, okay, so that was just a smoke screen because Verde was already planned multiple years ago.
Yeah.
And then they went about the hoopla about how they're gonna like adjust that and do Leucadia first. And now we're talking about Verde yet, so it means that their statement about shifting gears never happened, and instead they just continued on with Verde, and that's why it's shovel ready.
Yeah.
Leucadia should be shovel ready. Verde should not be shovel ready.
I think most people in Leucadia would agree with that.
And so with that, they applied for a grant, and they're gonna have to match the grant. If I get in, I'm gonna say, we have the grant, you have the grant, but we're not gonna be matched. Any money is gonna be going to Leucadia crossings first. If we get the grant later, that's fine. If we don't, that's fine. We already heard from that area. We can look into that crossing at a later date, but if we have to like put, what was it, like I think they said like 3 million or something into it. That 3 million is going to go to at grade crossing. We're not going to put it into a crossing that is basically the crossing to nowhere.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
there's a lot to say about all that. Fair enough. That's good though.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, okay. So we have one other question that has to do with the walking, essentially a walking path along Vulcan. So what is your vision of providing a safe pedestrian walkway along Vulcan?
Okay, so
Leucadia, I'm guessing.
So before people were even talking about this one, I was looking at along the railroad tracks. Now, a lot of people are talking about having something like along the street, but I noticed, and if you are in Leucadia and you park by the tracks, the way they have the parking set up, with the cement blocks, there's a large gap between the blocks and the rail fence. And at least in my area, there's people walking their dogs and taking walks and everything down that open space, and it's just like weeds and everything. And so, like, my philosophy of needs before aesthetics, where we don't have to have everything fancy.
Right.
We don't need to have a footpath like they have in Cardiff that's all fancy and, you know, planted up and everything. What I envision is we could take that area, that existing area in front of the parking spots and
Yeah.
before the rail fence,
Yeah.
and put down like a ground granite or something,
Sure,
and
sure.
turn that into a walking path. Like, it's not going to be a fancy, you know,
Yeah, but
deluxe
it's
walking
something, right?
paths. Yeah,
And
it's
if
something.
yeah, I think on the other side, on the south side of Leucadia Boulevard, on the west side of it, I think they've done just that. And in fact, I think for next week's city council meeting, I think one of the agenda items is to approve some grant application, something related to the process of applying for grant funding for just that walkway thing. There's a lot to say about it, right? Because unlike the rest of Vulcan that has parallel parking, that whole section right between La Costa and Leucadia has that,
Yeah.
because it has that perpendicular parking, it just doesn't leave as much room for that. So there's, as you say, there's an opportunity there. It just would take some sort of pushing and some coordination with the city. But as you say, I mean, that's, I think, what we had been advocating for, is there's some room there. Can't we use it? It's super
Yeah.
important, especially, I mean, it's always been important, but even more so with their fencing and right.
Yeah, and I mean, in the future, if you have crossings, that would make it easier,
Yeah.
because you have the
Yeah.
people already, you have everything situated at the fence, and so
Yeah.
people come out of the crossings, they'll go right into the walking path.
Yeah, good.
And we already have crossings, you know, flashing crossings along parts of Vulcan as it is now,
Right,
and
right.
those really don't connect to anything on the parking side
It's
except the
it's
car.
another important point. They
Yeah.
allow you to cross the street, but I guess if you're walking to your car, I don't know
Yeah.
what else there's really not that much else that'll take you there, but okay. Yeah, good. Well, I think that's it for questions.
Okay.
And actually the timing worked out well, because we're at 7 minutes, so 54, so just under an hour, so it's perfect. So I'm going to turn it over to one of my colleague, Rob, is going to finish up. But again, thank you, Michael. It was nice to meet you. And I
Thank
may
you.
see you out and about in Leucadia, and I'll say hello, because we probably don't live that far from each other. So
Thank you
cheers.
so much.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you again, Michael, and for the rest of you for joining us for the mayoral interviews. If you missed any of our interviews, they'll be available on our NOWLeucadia website, hopefully tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, at the latest on Saturday. If you need voter info or polling locations, go to San Diego Register of Voters at sdvote.com. Since we are a group of volunteers, it means we're always looking for help. Go to our website, NOWLeucadia, sign up and get involved. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.